Hello, guys, and welcome to Write Your Legacy podcast and videos. My name is Alex Comment. I'm your host, and today I have a very special guest. His name is Chuck GARCIA, and if you don't know him, you will learn a lot about leadership, emotional intelligence, and public speaking. I will not tell you a description of him now, but I can tell you that he's an amazing person. We met through friends in common, and I was amazed by his quality of talking and speaking. I told my wife, I like this guy. I can understand everything that he's saying. So I told myself, okay, I will read his book and I will interview him. But I didn't know that he was so famous, so successful. So you will learn a lot. Chuck GARCIA, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, Alex. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I am humbled and grateful for such kind words.
You know, I try to have special guests on my podcast, videos, interview people that are successful, but you're beyond successful. I didn't know that you have this journey. I will let you share your journey for people, but by reading your book, I knew that you did a lot of speeches in, I think, 20 countries. You're a teacher at the university, and you also are a very special leader. So you talk about leadership, right? And you're the former head of global marketing at Bloomberg. So I was amazed by your journey. Can you talk a little bit of who you are, what brings you to this journey, just to introduce your personality?
I'd be happy to, and thank you, Alex, for the opportunity to contribute to your show. I'm delighted to be here. As toward what I do for a living, I am really blessed because I get to go to work every day in the service of somebody else's success. And the reason I say that is because I'm very blessed to have grown up in a career where a lot of people made a difference in my life. So to summarize it, I'm a former Wall Streeter. I went to college and majored in finance for one reason. I wanted to go to Wall Street. And what I wanted out of a financial career, I wanted the dynamic nature of every day being different, but I also wanted to travel the world. I had spent a semester abroad in Amsterdam when I was in college, and it really fueled my desire to want to see even more of the world. So the majority of my career, which actually led me to all of this, Alex, I spent many years for this company, Bloomberg. And I joined in, it was a very little company that nobody ever heard of. I'm bilingual, I speak good Spanish, so my first 7 years was in charge of building business in Latin America. Everything south of the United States. So
Okay.
for years, I traveled in Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, all over Latin America. And for the next several years, I became the spokesman for the company, where many, sometimes over 100 times a year, my job was to stand on stage in front of very big audiences and discuss the value of my company, the difference that we were making, and why anybody would care. It was through that skill set that I acquired, and nobody really taught me. It was an opportunity that was given to me, and I said, oh my God, I have no idea how to do this, but I just showed a little bit of talent. So I really worked to develop this as a craft, just the way that you have developed a profession.
I have two questions. Sorry to interrupt you. Two questions.
Okay.
Number one, what was the largest audience? Because I talk in front of 3,000 of people and I was so happy. What was the largest audience that you talked to people?
It was a couple of thousand. I don't know how many, but Alex, to me, it never mattered. I never saw the thousands of people, because if it was just you and me,
yep.
If it was me in front of thousands, I never viewed that as being that different, because with you and I are very well connected now. We have a real good rhythm. What I try to do with the audience is how can we best establish the same kind of rhythm and make everyone in the audience feel like I'm speaking to them. That's what we try to do. And those are the techniques I learned through the years. And so all of that led me to, when I left the Wall Street world, what I do now is a few things. I'm what's called an executive coach. I coach people to do one of two things. I either coach them to step onto stage, television, anything that requires them to persuade or to connect to an audience. And then the second thing I teach is something called emotional intelligence. And they go very hand in hand, helping very smart, successful people learn how to use their emotions in very positive ways, even though they may be under enormous pressure. They still have to stand up on that stage and speak as if they are feeling no pressure. So what a wonderful thing to do to be able to coach them. And then also I'm on faculty at Columbia University. I teach engineers this. And engineers are not taught to speak emotional. They're taught to be engineers. But what they found is as engineers continue to climb the career ladder, what do they need? Communication skills, emotional intelligence, how to develop a presence, how to persuade, and how to inspire. So most of my time when I'm either not professionally speaking myself, motivational speaking about these two topics, I'm teaching other people to do it. And lastly, which I had the pleasure, I'm a radio show host, and thank God I had Alex Cormont on my show, which was lovely, but it was a wonderful outlet, Alex, for me to be able to bring your work and your contribution to the world to our audience. And that's why I'm so glad today, anything that I can do that can help create insight to your audience, that's what we do. And I'm so glad to be able to do this with you.
Thank you so much, Chuck. And it was such a pleasure to be on your radio show. You have an amazing podcast. I will include all the links just right below. But I think you summarize exactly what you're doing. You bring people leadership, public speaking, emotional intelligence. Communication is key. It's just an amazing tool. Just the funny story I wanted to say before to ask you my question. I got my mother on the phone yesterday and we were talking and I said, oh, tomorrow I will interview such an amazing person. He's a teacher at Columbia University. And she was amazed. She said, how did you connect? How is that possible? And I said, but your son, you know, is now an entrepreneur.
Yes, you are. You have a lot of people, Alex. I'm not sure your mother might look at you like you're still the little baby Alex that wants to play soccer or basketball. You wanted to play basketball. And she still sees you as the guy that wants to play basketball. I see you as somebody that brings your work to so many people who need that help. And your mom may not see that because she's so close to you. Yeah. Yet I see what you do, not unlike what I do. We do slightly different things, but we bring something that's very important that people never learned. You know, you bring the love lessons. You bring how do you connect and love. How do you give love to get love? In my case, when I'm training someone to speak, I'm actually training them to give somebody a gift, to help them to be better at what they do. That's what we do. And it's an honor that we do that.
Exactly. So it was so funny because I can do anything if I interview someone, because you're not just a teacher, you know, we have a lot of hats. But when I said that you were a teacher, she was like, oh my God, now you're connecting to the real world. And you know what is funny?
Yeah, you get real people.
Yeah, the real world. Like just for the parents, you know, what is important is school, only school.
Right. So, yeah. How do we teach our children?
Exactly. So, but you know, I remember something, you know, telling this story because when I started to be a relationship expert, my mom told me, no, you can't. That's crazy. And reading your books, there is one sentence that resonates so much with me. This sentence was, no matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world. Mm-hmm. Do you really believe this? Do you really believe that if we have words and ideas and communication and every skill, then we can create the life we want?
I believe it's the only thing that can. And that quote, I want to give credit. There was a wonderful movie starring Robin Williams that was called Dead Poets Society. And he played a character named John Keating, who was a teacher. He was an English teacher. He taught poetry. And what I loved about watching him, he brought the poetry to life. And when I watched the movie, I was not a teacher quite yet, but when I watched the way that he taught, it inspired me. And that's why in my book, I talked about it in the introduction. It's the biggest impression that I have, that what good teachers do is they bring their subjects to life. And when we think about us as human beings, where does it begin? It's our words that lead to actions, that lead to behaviors that allow us to accomplish. So while I do love that quote, what I recognize, Alex, is what I teach, what you teach people to do is to help someone to love and be loved. And how do they do it? In words and actions. It has to start with some place. What I do is if somebody has an idea, in order to bring that idea to life, they're going to have to communicate it in a way that is persuasive and in a way that is powerful. Many entrepreneurs have great ideas, but where it falls short, they haven't been trained how to translate the words and make people feel like you're bringing the idea to life. Because if you can't do that, how are you going to get an investor to want to be both emotionally and financially invested in your words unless you believe them and unless you have the ability to bring them to life? Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And it works also for relationship, you know? It's like it can apply to every aspect of communication.
That's right. And that's my point, is this is not just something for Wall Streeters. What you do is touches every human being. What I do touches every human being. They're used in different ways, but you think about what we do as adults in our lives. We live our life, we go to work, we love our children, we love our spouses, but how? How do we? You teach them how to love. I teach them how to speak. Nobody teaches that in school.
No, nobody.
In fact, you said it in your book. As I was reading your book, you said, there's a very big gap here. And when people were skeptical and they said to you, Alex, you're going to teach people that? And your point is, nobody else is teaching that. You just can't expect to just grow up and all of a sudden you know how to love. It's a teachable subject.
That's true.
Speaking as children, we teach our children to speak, but that they learn. But what I do, we build on it. Mm-hmm. Because if they would just try to do it themselves, they're inhibiting their success. So the words, they matter. Words are powerful. Words can both construct. Words are also powerful, and they can destruct and destroy. Think about how we hurt other people, not physically, but our word choices. Our word choices we use to express our love, and our word choices we can use to express hatred. We choose love, but other people choose hatred. We have to recognize that. We don't always agree with it, but we know that that's the way the world is. So we try to do our best to help people to learn the power of language as a matter of to inspire, to persuade, and in many cases to provoke thinking, to see things differently. That's what words do, and they can be taught.
And this is something, as you said, that we didn't receive the education. What you're saying looks so simple, but there's a lot of details that we have to learn. And becoming a coach, a public speaker, I just started my journey with a book from Dale Carnegie, how to win
friends and influence people. I use that in my classroom.
This is just so important. And
in fact, Alex, I assigned 2 books. I assigned my book, which is called The Climb to the Top. It's a leadership communication framework I developed. Thank you. I appreciate you holding it up. Indeed.
I love it.
Leadership communication framework. I integrate that. So it's based on my framework called the 10 Commandments of Great Communicators. And it's a toolkit, no different than when you were learning to play basketball. Free throw is a different thing than a layup. That's a different thing from shooting from the perimeter. That's a different thing from a rebound. You were taught as a basketball player all these different techniques, and you needed to know when to use them at different times. In a climb to the top, it's a lot of different speech tactics techniques to be used at different times. I integrate that with the wonderful book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, that was written in 1936, which in my opinion is the best book on human behavior I've ever read, because it helps us to identify how to connect to the human spirit as a toolkit. Your book was a toolkit. I loved your book because it so clearly explained the problem, the gap, and how to fill the gap. So I think in a way, we all do that. We've all contributed in a very similar way. And there are people in their lives at different times that would need different tools. So I'm really glad you're reading that one. It's a time now in your life, you want that toolkit.
Yeah. You know, this book was amazing for me. And I continued the journey and I read some book, I did some training. But in your book, I want to talk about something that I have never learned somewhere else. And it's about the silence. In love and relationship, I talk about the no contact, radio silence. Talk like let your partner or your ex-partner on the side focus on yourself. Use the silence to be able to reconnect later. In the public speaking, in your book, you say that silence is an amazing tool to connect with people. And I understand what you're saying, but for the people that didn't read yet, climb to the top, I will put all the info. But for these people that didn't read the book yet, why is silence so powerful? And one more time, I have never read in any other book this specific idea. So it's very important, guys, that you will read the book if you want to improve your communication. But why is silence so important, Chuck?
I appreciate it, Alex. Yeah, what you're describing is in the book, there are 10 chapters. Chapter 8 is called The Power of the Pause. And what happens a lot, Alex, when we're working with people that have something to say, they have it all in their head and they just explode like a machine gun as fast as they can because they have so many things they want to convey. However, what they're not realizing, in spite of their good intentions, is the person who receiving the information able to absorb the information in the way that you intend? Well, if you go too fast and you don't allow an opportunity to let the information absorb into the mind, this is the way we catch up. So think about the dynamic that you have with your spouse, with your children, with your mom or dad. By being able to strategically let their ears catch up to your words, only then can we ensure that your message is being absorbed. That silence, unfortunately, Alex, in English, and I don't know, I don't speak French, I speak Spanish, but there is a couple things that happen. In English, we get very lazy often, and we infuse our language with wasted words called filler words. And when we don't know what to say, and I'm going to say it right now. So, Alex, it's like, I sort of literally kind of like, yeah. So what is that? Well, people do speak like that because nobody told them that there's a better way. So what I try to do in this technique, instead of saying so, don't say anything. Today, I'm going to be on Alex's radio show. I could have said, somebody asked me, what are you doing today? So, this guy like Alex, he has a podcast. Well, you can hear the difference in the efficiency.
Yeah.
When you, Alex, let's assume you're going to go on stage for 45 minutes. Imagine that every one of your sentence has so, yet instead we replace those words with silence and we let the listener catch up, absorb, and retain And the best way that I can tell our audience here, watch the really good comedians, the way they set up a punchline. They say something and then they pause, silence. Mm-hmm. They let the silence build the tension in the room. And then, bam, they set up the punchline. That, Alex, is silence. And we're not here to tell jokes, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't borrow the best techniques from the professionals that use silence to build the power.
I can just relate on what you're saying. Every time people use silence, it just brings attention. It just opens our eyes, our ears. And when we are stressful, that's where we talk very, very, very fast. If you listen, my interview with Chuck, I was very stressful. So I was speaking so fast. But now I just use your pace. I relate on your books. I read the book after. So I just realized that silence or just punctuation is very important. Something else
it's another tool, Alex. It's another tool that should be strategic. There are times to use them in order to let your message be absorbed. Let it sit in the air, because also when you're silent, you don't have words to consider. It's how you feel. We feel, oh. Or imagine you're about to propose to your lovely girlfriend and you're going to ask her to marry you. If you go in there so fast, she won't even remember. It's not just what you say, it's the manner by which you say it. That's what people remember. They don't remember the words. They remember how you made them feel. So I can even say with you, Alex, I can see the difference today versus when you were on.
Yeah.
I see you're very conscious. You're taking your time. That's wonderful. And as the teacher, how cool that is to see you. I'm watching you evolve with a very simple tool, and you're using it now, and it's effective.
Yeah.
Well done.
I'm just trying to learn every single day. I'm like the people that will be watching this video. We need to improve. So everything that I know I can improve, like make some pause, make sure that people will really listen to you. That's something I can manage when I'm doing videos. But when I'm doing lives, I was not so good. So I just decided to focus my attention on this. The second thing that I learned with your book, and I'm still trying to figure it out, that's why my question will be helpful for me and for the community. You basically said, I will use my word, I'm sorry if it's not your words, Chuck, but that call to action are necessary. So when you do a speech, when you talk to someone, you need to finish with a call to action, meaning people need to do actions after all. In your book, you talk about a movie that I watched just to try to understand. It's Miracle, the movie about Oki. And I will let you talk about it if you want. But my question is, sometimes I say call to action to people and they will say, what is call to action? So how can we ended up a communication or use the call to action in the communication to have some efficiency, to be efficient, basically?
Yeah, well, what you're describing, Alex, imagine if you and I got 100 people in, let's say, Miami, New York, it doesn't matter wherever they are, and we were to ask them, how many of you have been in a meeting and the meeting was over and everybody's walking out of the meeting and you don't know what you're supposed to do with what just happened? You spent an hour, a lot of people said a lot of things, and maybe you took notes. And then I said, so what do you do with this? Well, what do you mean? So you spent an hour in a meeting, you took notes. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. This is the call to action. What I ask in my classes, in my coaching, on the radio show, what I ask everyone to do is, what do you want your audience? Now, it could be when you're proposing, what do you want your girlfriend to do? Well, the call to action, I want her to say yes, which means you have to know how to ask the question. The call to action is get her to say, yes, I love you, I will marry you. But in a business setting, a lot of people talk about their products. Okay, what do you want them to do with this? I don't know. Well, here's the call to action. every time, to anybody listening, anytime you are conducting a meeting or you want something from somebody, and I mean that in a very nice way, there's something that you need or want. This is your call to action. What do you want them to think about whatever you're doing? I want them to think that what I'm doing is something good. Okay. Mm-hmm. What do you want them to feel? Well, I want them to feel that our conversation matters. And then what do you want them to do with this? Well, I want them to take this and I want them to learn this new skill. That's your call to action. It's very defined and it's clear. I get it. My call to action is to learn the power of the pause. Read chapter 8 of A Climb to the Top. That's your call to action. Then come back to me and let's practice. Not enough people, Alex, are conscious of call to action. Get them to do something. Anything is better than nothing.
This is, that's just amazing. And I will watch the recording. I will jot these 3 questions because I learn it. And I don't have this ego to say I know everything. I'm learning every single day. And your questions are making me think about my next speech. How can I improve? How can I do it? But for the people that will listen to us, it could be entrepreneurs. It could be people that have some difficulty in their love and relationship. You need, if you want to talk to your ex-partner, to your girlfriend, boyfriend, you need to focus on the actions. What do you want them to do? Because we are so good at explaining that we are not feeling good, the relationship is not what we want, but we don't tell them exactly what are you looking for. So I would just say that listening to Chuck, we can just change our communication even in the love field, but it could be with your boss. If you want a raise, you need to make sure that he will understand or she will understand what do you want. I guess it's something that we need to learn. As we always say, nothing is natural. Do I understand correctly, Chuck? Just to make sure.
I'm sorry?
Do I understand correctly your message and we think about call to action? Yeah.
Yeah, spot on. Because I think the biggest, I'm keeping this in a business context. I think even many of the entrepreneurs or many of the CEOs that I coach, we never step onto a stage or a meeting until we have defined the call to action. It's what's called begin with the end in mind. What do you want the end to be? The end is a call to action. I want you to go read A Climb to the Top. Well, if that's where we're ending, how are we going to persuade them so that we have created the communication that gets us to that call to action? Everything is in the service of the conclusion. What have we said that leads them to ask the question or to make the statement, here is your call to action? If you don't have a call to action, nothing will get done.
I will just quote your words, begin with the end in mind. This was one of my notes. I just put it in red. I have another one that was very important. So I want you to talk about it. Can you just summarize? So for you, what is begin with the end in mind? So we have to think about the goal and the call to action first.
Right. Yeah. What I'm referencing is a wonderful book came out years ago called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, written by Stephen Covey. And the book had 7 different tools and it had an impact on me. And I remember as I was reading this was well before I wrote A Climb to the Top. It just stuck in my mind, begin with the end in mind. And I said, I never thought of it that way, because when I constructed a speech, there was a beginning. And sometimes I didn't know what the end was. And I'm making it up. I was like, that's not good. So once I changed the mindset of the end, what is the end? And that's what we call, Alex, the recency effect. That in chapter 1 of the book, I described the primacy effect. People tend to remember the first things you say, and the recency effect. People tend to remember the most recent thing you said. This is where your call to action, and this is where you begin with the end in mind. Well, if the recency effect, if that's the thing that they remember, that is your end point in your call to action. Everything that you're writing for your meeting or your presentation is in the service of that moment. Imagine if for 45 minutes you had a brilliant speech and you didn't know what the end was, and you didn't define the call to action, you've wasted the brilliance of the speech. It's ineffective. So that is beginning with the end in mind. Think about what you want your audience to do. There's your end. Once you have that, now you can begin your speech. So it's flipping the model, Alex. It's being complete opposite.
Yeah. And I completely agree, because we focus mostly on the beginning, which is also one of the most important parts.
It is.
But the end, the more we have the end in mind, the easiest also the process will be. And of course, you will be able to deliver exactly what you want, because that's what people will remember also.
You talk a little bit about it in your book when you talked about the topic of seduction. And I really appreciate that, because imagine, in particular, there's an action. And it doesn't have to be even in a sexual term. It could be in any term where you're perhaps, will you marry me? Imagine if you expressed love for all these years and you never asked the question. And she wants you to ask the question, because there's an expectation. If you don't ask, why would I marry you? Ask me and I'll answer. But failure to ask leaves the question in the air and there's no end. So it's not unlike we all trying to get to the same place by we define the end in mind. I want to ask her to marry me. Cool. Well, there's a lot of things that have to happen. and that's speeches. There's a lot of things that have to happen before we have the end in mind. Same thing. In fact, I want everyone, and I think you and I are now seeing this. This applies.
That's true.
Sports, very applicable. I'm a mountaineer in my mountain climbing. Begin with the end in mind. If the end in mind is to get to the top of the mountain, you're not going to get there just by wishing it. You have to understand all the things that happen. And it's not one thing. It's a lot of things along the way that you have to constantly adjust. Love is like that. We're constantly adapting and adjusting to our partner. And you talked about in the book about context, about the need to constantly read and to change and to understand, is the message that you're transmitting, are you sure that that's the message that she's receiving? You don't know. So you stay very emotionally invested and connected, and you understand love, like business, like mountain climbing, like basketball. They're a series of continual adjustments. What you and I really do, we teach people in the transitions. That's an important thing, because the transitions determine your next step. Like when you play basketball, what's your next pass? That's a very important part of basketball. The next pass, which leads to the next one, which leads to the basket. In business, we make a move, we make a counter move, we adjust. And I think that that's not emphasized enough in our learning. You write about it, I write about it. But we want our audience to feel that it's okay not to have it all figured out. We have to learn to adjust, and it's something we teach. And it's something people, if they're open to learning it, it works much more effectively.
And that will lead to my other question, the other red mark that was very important for me. How important is it to fail in order to get success? When I read, I think it was in the beginning of the book, I had this message. So I told myself, okay, I need to ask Chuck, because the people that will listen to us, they can say, oh, yes, you're a successful love coach. Oh, yes, you interview this amazing executive coach that will just do crazy things in his life, what you have done, climbing the Kilimanjaro, giving speeches in 20 countries, being a teacher. It's just, there's not enough to say. So for these people, they think that your journey was easy. They will think that it's just like, because it's you, they cannot do it. So my question is, how is it very important to fail in order to get success? What do you think of this, Chuck?
Yeah, generally, the people that we admire when it comes to success, and in the United States, I think we all admire Abraham Lincoln because he was such a great president. But what we don't know about him, I think he lost 12 elections. Like he kept losing. And every time, but nobody tells that story. Yet, every time when you read his biography or the stories written about him, every time he lost an election, it was a learning opportunity to figure out how do I improve on that. And he credits a lot of his ascension to the presidency in the adjustments of what other people viewed as failures. He said, if I viewed each election loss as a failure, I never would have been a president. I didn't view failure as failure. I viewed failure as an opportunity to improve on what I didn't do well. And in my own life, I say the same thing. We all have things that we could do better. We have challenges, we have obstacles. And somehow I think people have this impression that successful people just went to the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain with nothing in between. My point to everyone, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail, because don't see failure as failure, and don't let anybody make you feel that way. That's only you. Only you can feel that way. It's other people's judgments. But I think, Alex, part of becoming successful is learning how to absorb all of the mistakes and the failures, but also keeping the positive mindset. All right, what did I learn from this? And what many people will say, particularly in sports, I either win or I learn. I don't look at the loss as a loss, because if I dwell on that, I'm never going to figure out how to win. So the way you learn in basketball how to win is you watch the things that you could have done better, and then you work on those to improve your game. That's love, that's business, that's speeches. Go ahead and screw up. Every time you do it, watch yourself, learn from the mistake, come back better. Over the course of time, you may still make mistakes and you may still fail. It's a mindset. It's an opportunity to learn.
It's very beautiful what you're saying, because we have two choices. We have the choice to give up, or we have the choice to face ourselves in the mirror. And when I was young, when I played basketball, I had this mental coach, and I was really just programming to be the best. But in reality, I was not using all the tools. Now I can reflect on myself. I was still young. I didn't have the education. Maybe my parents could have done a better job to teach me, also to explain to me. But it's okay. I have learned. I'm in my journey now. And I want to say this because we all have our own journey. It takes time sometimes. As you said, there's a lot of obstacles. But I want you to face also yourself in the mirror. If you have done something wrong, it's okay. But you need to know that you should not do it again. Because I've coached so many people, they do over and over the same mistake. And I keep saying, like Albert Einstein said, foolishness is doing the same thing and waiting for different results. We need to implement the tools. And the number one thing that you need to do right now is to go grab your book. It's not a book. It's a bestseller. It's different. There is book and there is bestseller, guys. Because in this one, you have tons of tools and actions. So this is what I really love, Chuck, about your book. I'm very difficult with books. You know, there's few books that I love. We have the same references about old books from like old authors. But your book, I understood why it was a very bestseller, to be honest with you. And even if you're not a public speaker, you need this for your communication. So thank you so much for sharing this to the world, Chuck. Sorry, thank you so much for being here also. I know your time is very valuable. I always give to my interviewee, my invitee, the last word. What could be the last word for people about emotional intelligence, communication? What can you say for them to, let's give them a call to action.
Let's give them a call to action. I want to say two things. One, my first call to action is generally how I open up the first classes at Columbia to my engineering students. I walk into the classroom, I turn on my PowerPoint, I don't speak. I toss up onto the PowerPoint 3 things. Number one, Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Be afraid of not learning from them. Number 2, strive for progress, not perfection. Number 3, there is no failure. There's only feedback. And I do it all silently. I want to command the silence in the room. So all of the senses are pointed on that what I have created for my students is a safe place. It's okay to not be okay. I am here not to judge, but to teach and to instruct you. And then the second thing I want to leave them with is the Winston Churchill quote. He has many good ones, but what he said is, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. I see, Alex, too many people give up when things are not easy. I want them to think the opposite, that the love, the accomplishment is in the struggle and in the removal of the obstacles. And the only way to do that is, in spite of what everyone else tells you, drown out the noise, stop listening to the critics, and try and fail and try and fail. Most entrepreneurs who have succeeded will tell you they failed 4 times. Imagine if they didn't try for the 5th. That is my message.
Thank you so much, Chuck. That was a very powerful message, you know, because we all have experienced a lot of troubles in our life and we all have our own journey. So don't quit, guys. Make sure that you will continue to learn. So I will include all the links just right below the video, of course, for the podcast, for your website, for your book, A Climb to the Top, guys. Remember to grab your copy. And what can we do for you? Where do you want to go to the podcast? What can we do for you, Chuck?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Alex. Thank you. And thank you to all of our listeners for your consideration. To further learn about our work, we have a podcast called A Climb to the Top. We have a book called A Climb to the Top. You can go to my website. It's chuckgarcia.com. Just by going to the website, there are several tabs. You'll see the book tab, you'll see the podcast tab, my coaching, all the things that we do that we bring to the world in the service of others' success. And that's the point that I want to get. And I want to thank you, Alex. You wake up every day and your wonderful book was written in the service of somebody else's happiness. What I do, what I strive to do, is wake up every day in the service of somebody else's success. Because sometimes they're tied, sometimes they're not. It depends on the individual. But how fortunate we are to be able to learn from each other on many of these different things and recognize that we're all a team. We're all in this together. We're all here to help each other to live happier, more successful lives. And for that, I am very grateful. And to be on this show, Alex, it's just a wonderful joy. And I thank you for the opportunity to work with you again. It's always a pleasure, but also to speak to your audience.
Thank you so much, Chuck. So your message was powerful. It will be in French. It will be in the My English
Cool.
Also YouTube channel for everyone. I want everyone to know. I think that your book is not translated yet in French, but if there's a lot of copy, guys, it will do it. It told me that it will promise me. So guys, we need to make sure that for everyone that speaks English, you need to order this book, guys, okay? And you need to send a message to Chuck to say, thank you so much for being on this podcast because it served you and it gave you a lot of advice and me too, to be honest. Yeah. Chuck, one more time, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Alex. It was a pleasure to be here.
Yes, bye-bye, everyone. Take care.